Hi, my name is Chris Lane and I am co-convener of Studying London, which is the module that we're going to be doing on Fridays as part of the extended degree in social sciences and humanities. What I'm going to try to do now is deliver a lecture as part of my walk into work. And in doing that, I'm going to try to pick up on some of the themes that we'll be covering over the course of the module. I wanted to start by talking about where I am now. I'm at home, and my journey is obviously going to connect home to work. And I was going to give you a little bit of an insight into where I live. We're going to be witnessing the journey that I make to work, but I wanted to start with my home. Cycling is a bit of a feature of the way that we travel in my family, and I wanted to show you my son's bike. Where is it? There we go. Actually, one of the features of his bike, it's a shocking thing in my opinion, is that it has no brakes. Can you see? No brakes anywhere, and the reason is because it's got a fixed wheel, and that means that you can stop it by just pedalling backwards. I've just bought my daughter a bike. It's this one. She's pretty horrified by it because it's second hand, it's a bit rusty, but actually I think it's a very, very beautiful old bike. It includes a dynamo, which means that it has a light that powers itself through the act of pedalling. So this is my house, built in the mid-1850s, and my street. If you look back at the census from that period, and you can find it online, you can see all the people who lived here. And there's an urban myth about the street that when the bombs dropped in the Second World War, and actually this was the place where the very first bomb dropped in the First World War, Stoke Newington, but when the bombs dropped in the Second World War, all of the houses jumped a metre off their foundations and then landed back exactly where they were again. But one of the outcomes of that was that, as you can see behind me now, quite a lot of the houses were actually destroyed, and in their place were built social housing projects. I want to say a bit about what we're going to be doing on this module. The idea is that we'll be studying London. I think we'll be using London as a kind of laboratory, as a kind of lens through which we can think about the subjects that we're interested in the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities. Those subjects are wide-ranging and they cross media, culture and communications. They're involved with areas like community work and social work, and also areas like social policy. I thought I might start with what I'm doing now. So I've got my embarrassing selfie stick, just being banned by Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. I'm a bit conscious that I'm not Zoella, but I think Zoella's an interesting example of a modern media celebrity. She's notorious for having had somebody ghostwrite a novel on her behalf, and her reputation skyrocketed as a result of her YouTube exploits, and then she kind of cashed in on her reputation and published a novel, and then was outed for having not written it herself, or at least not been the complete author of what she had produced. And I'm conscious of that in relation to where we are in Stoke Newington, because actually it's the birthplace of the novel. It's where Daniel Defoe lived, and he was the author of Robinson Crusoe. About one really important idea that we'll come back to again and again over the course of the module, and that's that when we think about society, or we think about the media, or we think about literature, ideas about continuity, that things remain the same, and ideas about change go hand in hand. A number of local authorities in London have attempted to create regulations about whether fast food outlets can be located close by to schools. The worry being that young people will not make healthy choices in the food that they decide to buy at lunch break. The university's been involved in a really important research project to look at the status of fast food outlets in the local economy, and one of the things that they've observed is that in order to become economically active, it's often a choice to open up a fast food restaurant that is one of those available to gain employment. And the reason for that is that there are relatively low costs to entry in that industry. So they're often the mainstay of, on one hand, the way that people eat today, and on the other hand, people's livelihoods and the livelihoods connected to their well-being in a wider sense, their economic well-being. So one of the projects that the university set up in conjunction with the Mayor's Office is to work with fast food outlets to work out how they can make very small and very low-cost interventions to improve, in small ways, the healthiness of food that's served. So one example is that there's advice about how to change salt shakers so that they dispense less salt, and the trick is to reduce the number of holes in the dispenser so less salt comes out, and that's been shown to have an impact on the intake of salt by people using those outlets. So clearly this is, small but potentially very meaningful interventions. I'm now just crossing Green Lanes, and this gives me a chance to talk about another aspect of the makeup of the city. And I wanted to particularly look at this idea of identity, and the way that identity is connected with people's sometimes religion, culture and ethnicity. And Green Lanes is a place that has a particularly high concentration of people from Turkish origin, and the school that we're about to pass is Highbury Quadrant Primary School. So one of the themes that we can pick up here, I think, is this idea that schools face huge challenges over issues like migration and the resourcing of meeting the needs of diverse communities, and of course they're under increasing pressure from government to demonstrate impact, to demonstrate that they're able to compete, to do well for every student. And inner city schools in the recent past have been at a real disadvantage in that respect. One of the big changes and transformations that's happened over the course of the last 10 years, and I think this is partly as a result of the real investment that's been seen in the Academies programme and the Building Schools for the Future programme, is that inner city schools are now much more successful in delivering outcomes for young people. And one of the statistics that's been quite widely discussed in the last year or so is the idea that if you're a child from a socio-economic class 4, 5, 6, 7 in the inner city, you're likely to be achieving better grades at school than if you're a child from a so-called middle-class background in the rest of the country on average. So I think we're beginning to see an interesting connection and link here. The idea that from the perspective of media and culture, we've got interests in identity and in the way that our identities are represented online and digitally, and then a link to health and well-being. And and then a connection to issues around education. What I maybe didn't mention around the points I was making about fast food outlets is that problems to do with childhood obesity and the question of whether interventions should be varied according to ethnic group. And certainly one of the observations has been that interventions have tended to be designed around the particular physiognomy and cultural conditions of the white population, and haven't taken proper account of the particular situation of, for example, black and minority ethnic children. And that's another area that London Met's got some expertise in, developing and designing interventions around evidence of different manifestations of obesity and causes of obesity and ways of measuring obesity in different populations. I'd like to just maybe spend a few moments going through some of the areas that we're going to be looking at. We've mentioned health, we've mentioned education, we've mentioned literature. Some of you will have the opportunity to take courses in media studies, media communications. You may choose to be studying digital media. If you're interested in the social professions, it may be that you want to think about a career path and an education path, a degree pathway that might lead you to becoming a teacher in the future. You might similarly think about becoming a social worker or qualified community worker or youth worker, or someone who wants to work in youth policy. We've also got real strengths in the faculty around the areas of crime and policing, crime and psychology, so you can combine criminology with a number of different subjects. And certainly if we think about crime and the city, one of the things we might talk about is the way that we design our cities, the way that we design urban spaces in a way that reduces crime. And I'll just point out something that we're passing now. This is a piece of 1960s or 1970s public housing, and many people would have criticised the style of public housing from that period on the grounds that there were too many places that prevented people from feeling safe. And lots of the interventions that have been made recently to reduce crime and to reduce the fear of crime have been around the pattern of urban design, things like street lighting. There's a street light. Making sure that communities get to influence the kinds of facilities that local councils make investments in. I think this is a really interesting street that we're walking down now. Islington, we're in now, one of the locations of, by popular repute, the people who are working in Westminster, very wealthy, very powerful, and on the other side of the street, right opposite, social housing. And Islington may have this reputation as being a wealthy place, but actually it has some of the largest numbers of workless households of any borough in London. So incredible disparities between wealth on one hand and disadvantage and deprivation and poverty on the other. And I think that those are issues that resonate particularly for students who are studying subjects like sociology and social policy. And I think that one of the strengths of the university is the way that it's embedded within its local community. We've got really strong connections with our local councillors. And we've talked about education, haven't we already? Particularly I was concentrating on the primary stage, but I think, university education itself is something that governments position as something that has the potential to improve our economic well-being as a society. Sometimes they forget to mention the kind of wider personal goals that getting a university education might help us to achieve, to feel excited about the very act of learning. I think is something that we feel is really, really important. And I don't think we can really divide that joy at the prospect of learning from the benefits that are more maybe tangible in economic or social terms. But I think there's a real connection then between the university, its local community, local politics, and the way that we reshape the city. And what we're approaching now is Highbury. And actually we're just passing Highbury Hill, and it's one of the roads that surrounds the old Highbury Stadium. And the Highbury Stadium relocation to the Emirates by Arsenal Football Club was something that was a big transformation that's happened in the last 10 years. Very controversial at the time, lots of bargaining going on the part of the football club and with the council over the balance between delivering Arsenal's business objectives, which were to be able to expand the stadium, to realise greater commercial benefits, to be able to make money for its owners, often based overseas, but also to develop the business and to become an even greater player in global football. And to balance with that, Islington Council's objectives, which have frequently been to try to, as I was saying before, reduce levels of deprivation, decrease poverty, improve the quality of housing, improve health and well-being. So one of the transformations that we've seen and we're about to pass by now is the emergence of the new Emirates Stadium, which is this monolithic citadel of football that is at once a football ground, but at the same time a huge conference centre. And sitting alongside that is a whole tapestry of new housing development. And we're just turning the corner now into Drayton Park, and at the back of the picture on my right, your left, you can see a huge new development stretching all the way along Drayton Park. And all of this will have been negotiated with Islington Council and represents probably a huge compromise over the balance between the gain that the council gets and the cost that the football club had to incur to make this happen. The football club will have made huge profits, but the amount of profit that they were able to make was something that Islington would have had or been able to make an impact over. And I think that some of the choices that have been taken, I think, haven't always been to the benefit of the local community. And one of the things I particularly point out is that when you walk around the stadium podium itself, and I'm just climbing the steps there now, you have very little sense of life or community, and I think that's a really significant problem. I think that the base of the stadium could have incorporated more services to the local community. It could have been a place where there was more of a sense of a public space. Now, there's been a little bit of work to bring in more of a sense of culture and community, And in fact, some of the housing does actually have its entrance onto the podium itself, but mostly what you're faced with is a huge, as I've said before, citadel of glass and steel that really is impenetrable unless you've got the resources to be able to afford the £50 or so that an average ticket might cost to go and watch a match. The football club. Arsenal are our partner of London Mets, and we're very proud of that. We collaborate over sports coaching awards and community sports. And actually I think Arsenal are very interesting in terms of the way that they've transformed sport. When Arsene Wenger arrived in the mid to late 1990s, I think British football was beset with issues like alcoholism of footballers, unhealthy eating, and also I think not the same kind of international outlook that exists today. In the last few days, the news has broken that Arsenal have signed a Brazilian defender, and they had to get the Home Office to approve this because he technically didn't fit into the criteria that Premier League clubs have to meet in order to sign people who are non-EU domiciled. But what this does represent is a sense that London as a city and football in general across the world is an increasingly global phenomenon, and that world cities begin to resemble one another in the sense that instead of perhaps being like each other as a whole, there are areas and regions that are corresponding to those areas and regions in other cities. And this is a theme that I think has been propounded by critics like Manuel Castells, who suggests that what characterises the modern age is this incredible connecting of areas across the world through information networks, and the result of that is that we have these connections between locales, and the sense that there's a locale that might have more in common with somewhere 12,000 miles away than it does with a neighbourhood that is just a stone's throw away, a few streets away in the same city. I think that's a very, very profound change that has been particularly associated with the advent of digital technology. And on the question of digital technology, and as we just enter Hornsey Road and close to where the library is based and the course team for the extended degree are based, I wanted just to say that one of the big themes that we're going to pick up on all the way through this module is around the question of your digital identity. So we've said a bit about identity, a bit about how identity is related to the city and some of the social issues and issues around media and culture that are related to the city. But I think what we want to do is help you to focus on how you can develop your digital identity, how you can learn the skills that you need in order to be successful in work and have skills that are really sought after and in demand. And I think increasingly those are digital skills. One of the things that we identify is that often young people and students are described as, I think this is a questionable term, but as digital natives. In other words, that you are somehow indigenous to contemporary digital culture, and that people of my age maybe are not. And I think that what we would say is that whilst there are many skills that people gain that are related to their upbringing around the use of computer games and social media, at the same time
there are many employment-related digital skills and skills that have to do with how you project your identity externally that need some significant further thought if you're going to be able to be successful, particularly in the employment marketplace.